Brought to you in association with Grendel Press. This is Werewolf the Podcast, a serial killer drama.
Hello, is it me you're looking for? Probably not with a voice like that. This is Werewolf the Podcast, and this is your werewolf Will. And we're still on our Viking journey that began at episode 101. We're still following Thorstein and Fen as they do Viking shit. You know how it is. Just to say, if you could review the show on the platform that you listen to it, if you could get notifications, if you could share it, that would be great. I don't really market this thing, so I need to get it out there somehow, and for some reason we got into the top 10% of podcasts this week with listeners index, so I don't know how that works, but apparently it's good. Someone messaged me. I have no idea. This is just for fun, really, for me. There's social media accounts. On Facebook, you can join the group, Werewolf the Podcast. There's links in the description. There's Instagram links there. There is Twitter links there. There is a link to the support the show thing where you can buy me a coffee if you want. I need a lot of coffee to keep me awake. Very tired today. And apart from that, we'll just carry on with the show. I hope you enjoy it. Thanks for listening. You're great. Let's carry on. Thorstein's journey started in a lowly place. He was just the son of a simple farmer. That's quite a low place in the society of the Osman. The Vikings were a very hierarchical society, and I is going into the details of that. I don't know what happened there. Why? Why do I need to go into the details of that? Why, you ask? Will, your podcast is entertaining how it is. How could you honestly improve it? It's brilliant. Thanks. Yeah, I know. I realise the incredible quality of my content. But, no, I need to make that a more visceral thing. Fucking but. I am missing an area that some are complaining about. So I've had accusations that this podcast is not educational enough. That's utter shit. As I've taught you many things. I've taught you how to correctly gut a human in the Ballet Dancer episodes. I even gave you the links to the tools on Amazon. And I have to say, it is worrying that those links I have on affiliation have been severely used. Well done, people. I've taught you many more things. How to get rid of bodies, buy a pie making company. I even told you how to become a werewolf and how truly difficult it is. So here goes for those moany people. Now, in my best teacher voice, I will tell you that it's your own fault if you don't listen, and that you're just wasting your own time, and the bell at the end is not for you. That is a signal for me. So unpack your stuff and sit the fuck back down. The Poetica, tells us that the first humans were made from pieces of driftwood that Odin found on the shore of the Great Sea whilst walking with two other gods. We don't know who the two other gods were. It's kind of confusing. Depends on the story. The wood washed up on the coast was of two different types. One was a piece of ash wood. The other was a piece of elm wood. How these creation stories come about is always a bit weird. You're often made from scrotums or men's seeds or stuff. One of my faves is an old religious idea that a god sneezed and you all fell out. The human booger. I've definitely met some of those. The lumps of wood were so obviously not human, no hair, no breath, and no minds, so the gods would give them those things so they could become the first humans. The humans did what humans do, and they didn't have a TV and produced a lot more humans. At this point, humans were all in the same class in society, so that needed fucking up. I mean, who the fuck wants equanimity or equality? Fuck's sake. What do you want, an ideal society? The story of the creation of these levels in society will be told in a thoroughly educational manner through the journey of Heimdall in the human lands. At first, humans did not move far away from the shore, the place of their birth. In fact, in the Norse world, humans traditionally did not move too far from the coast. So Heimdall wandered along the coast looking for human habitation, disguised as a stranger. A key learning point here is that hospitality was a very important thing for the Vikings. A stranger who knocked on your door before sunset must be treated well. It was vulgar for those to knock after sunset, and no one said what would happen if you did. I mean, they didn't have ring doorbells, so maybe they just ignored you. Or perhaps they nailed your hands to the wall. I can only hope. The person who knocked should be fed and found a bed for the night. Not a law, but just an expectation within that society. This is seen through all the sagas. Even if it was someone we didn't like, even if it is an enemy of the household, we should invite that cunt in and look after them. Maybe it would solve the homeless problem if we implemented this now, but I have to say I would do a lot of nailing of hands. We can see this idea of kindness and affability when the chaotic gods arrive at the home of the true gods and once inside are treated well. Modern historians think that this was a situation brought about due to the traveller being you one day. There were no hostelries or places to stay in Viking times, so people could only ask others for shelter on their journeys. If you treat people well, you should be treated well on your journeys, being safe and unhurt. Kind of makes good sense, doesn't it? Especially up north on the edge of the Arctic Circle with bears and wolves and shit. You don't want to spend your night on the cold hard ground while beasties want to eat you, do you? Heimdall, one of the gods, whose daddy's Odin and his mother, well, Odin was a bit of a dog, so Heimdall had 9 mothers. So fuck knows which one it was. It might explain the story I tell and how easily Heimdall jumps into bed with people. I mean, with that kind of role model, Odin, what's going to happen? Now you see why I like these Norse gods, Christians and chastity. Although I always get a little confused with Mary getting up the duff by God, the Holy Ghost or whoever, and Joseph really not giving a toss. Anyway, back to the story with our Heimdall. Other fun facts about Heimdall was that he had teeth that were made out of emeralds, or he had emerald teeth, and he was called Swordhead, and he was the whitest of the gods, whatever that means. Heimdall starts a journey early in the development of humans. He meets an old couple running a farm. They are known as great-grandfather and great-grandmother. They are apparently as ugly as fuck. They are poor and don't have much to offer the god, but they feed him and he shares their bed for 3 nights. If you know what I mean. Wink wink, nudge nudge, say no more, and a bit of how's your father and all that. 9 months later, great-grandmother pops out a sprog named, beautiful name here, I'm going to call my first this, Slave. He is ugly but hard-working and was born to do the shit jobs. Oh, and I mean the shit jobs. The slave man meets a hideous, hard-working slave woman. They have slave kids with awful names like Lumpy. But mum and dad cannot get married because they own nothing. I mean, these people even have tans. No, this does not make them sexy in the Viking world. It makes them unattractive because they have to work outside in the sun. This story led to the slave class in Viking society. Owned people commonly stolen on raids or bred for serving and doing shitty jobs with the slaves. They were seen as less than human and often treated as such. If you killed a slave, well, you might have to pay for him, but it wasn't murder. Anyway, back to our top shagger Heimdall as he continues his shagtastic journey. He now stops at another house. The couple here are slightly younger and are called grandmother and grandfather. The things that Heimdall puts himself through for us. Shagging these people. What a guy. They are naturally better looking and have jewellery and shit and better clothing. The food offered is not lumpy goop. No, it's not made out of slaves, but you know what I mean by lumpy. But it actually has meat in it. Heimdall is invited into their bed for 3 nights. Amazing what having emerald teeth will get you. It must be like those golden grills that gangsters have, but betterer. And yes, you can guess what happens next. 9 months later, another baby is born. This one is a red-haired, almost handsome, I like that, almost handsome chap called Freeman. He owns the farm and does slightly less shit jobs than the poor slaves. He's allowed to get married and everything. This is the Viking equivalent of our middle class, and this is where Thorstein started. Thorstein was lower middle class and was expected to be a farmer who could go raiding. His class should have held him at this point, because you can't move up to the next class. But let's get back to Heimdall and his journey of sluttiness, or is it studdiness? These Vikings like group sex, huh? Now he turns up at a large house. My favourite thing of note in the Poetica about this is that it has a door knocker. Why do we need to mention a fucking door knocker? And he uses that door knocker to announce his arrival. The home is lovely, with everything fresh and nice, and he wanders inside to be met by a beautiful couple, father and mother, both with long flowing blonde hair and blue eyes. This couple actually seemed to like each other, unlike the other 2 couples who seemed far too busy to actually spend any time together or have any intimacy, obviously apart from when shagging a stranger. These guys have a much nicer life. The man prepares weapons and trains, and the wife tells others how to maintain her home and spends her own time on looking pretty. The meal presented this time is given on a clean tablecloth and has fancy shit as part of it, like wine and white bread. Once again, our top shagger beds the 2 of them for 3 nights. Do you think it's like a cuckolding scenario with like the guy just watching his wife with a god? Or do you think like Heimdall's putting it everywhere, or vice versa, or... Use your own imagination there. Sadly, we never learn the details, but these Viking gods like to get their freak on. Again, after 3 nights of sleeping in the same bed, Heimdall leaves, and 9 months later, a boy is born, and he is called Nobleman, with blonde hair and snake-like eyes. Snake-like eyes? That was apparently as hot as fuck back then. Snake eyes. This kid is Heimdall's favourite, and he actually comes back and teaches the kid to read and carve the runes and rub it into the, husband that he'd shagged his wife. This guy will become a jarl or ruler and marry another lord's daughter. He will have noble kids who learn special skills like being able to talk to birds. I don't know. Why would you want to talk to birds? Perhaps they could talk to birds. I don't know. I can't really deny magic, can I? I mean, I'm all about the magic and bollocks. That's why I'm here after all. Later, the grandson of father and mother is told by a crow to stop wasting arrows shooting animals and to use those arrows to kill others with more land and power than him, and so is born the Riding King. So you can see, the hero of our story is never meant to be a ruler of men. He was not born into the correct class of society. That's what makes this story so very cool. Oh, that, and because, Thorstein's a fucking werewolf, of course, which makes him the next level up from even the nobleman, in my humble opinion. See? Educational fucking podcast and shit. You just learnt something that you had no reason to know. Just like when you're at school and learn trigonometry. trigonom, that thing with vectors. In the last episode, we learnt about Thorstein fighting off. No, not fighting off. Stopping. No, killing? Murdering. Yes, murdering. I mean, it was truly murder, or was it not? A bunch of people. He was becoming a very respected member of his tribe. Respected and slightly feared by them. Maybe he would end up like Loki's child Fenrir and be stopped from achieving by those that feared him. Those who heard the stories of the Wolfman began to realise this young boy would be Jarl. It was not all about his martial prowess. The kid seemed much older mentally than his years and showed a great maturity. That point obviously was Fenrir's direction. So at this point, I'll hand over to the mighty Fenrir as he continues with the story. Thanks for listening to that. I hope that was educational enough for you. And those people who wanted an educational part to the educational part of the podcast, then please review me and say how wonderful I was and gosh, aren't you worth 6 stars out of 5 and all that bollocks. Anyway, over to Fenrir. Aye, Thorstein was really mature for his age. I don't really know what the fuck happened with Will. He's an immature git. Thorstein was able to build loyalty in others. Ultimately, he managed to build forces to support him, but this was his downfall in the end, as it only takes one of those many supporters to stab you with a knife of disloyalty for it all to stop. But that is a later story in Thorstein's journey. This trust is one important difference between Will and Thorstein. Will, and I now know, loyalty is pish. It's not real. It is all about those people supporting you while they feed from you. They take what you offer and plot behind your back. Will is an immature wanker with a god complex, but at least he does not fall for that loyalty bullshit. It's not very nice, Fen. Shut up, Will. At 14, Thorstein was a big lad, well over 6 feet in height and filling out well. He was renowned for his capability already as a fighter. He was still immature, but could and would fight anyone. He was a true Drenger, living up to the ideal of the noble Viking warrior, not in a knightly Christian way, but within the bounds of what this society accepted as noble. I think he was the first true berserker. I know what you're thinking. I should either know that I shouldn't, but I don't. The berserkers have a kind of mystical history that has been built around them. They are the mad men of battle. They would run into battle in some trance, allowing them to take incredible damage and fight on. They were supposed to fight naked and without fear. They were the first into battle and the last to leave. They would bite their shields and often have to stop mid-battle to straighten their swords because they bent them due to their powerful strikes. All, the usual bullshit we hear. They were the Mancunians of a Sunday morning at about 4 a.m. outside Alfie's Kebabs. There have been a lot of historians who've looked at the evidence to try and find the truth about these warriors. They look at the sagas to try and work out if they were a real thing or not. Turns out, they were real things. The berserkers, that is. Not necessarily all the stories about them. I mean, turning into wolves and shit. That had to be a lot of bollocks, had it not? Well, historians have promulgated. Fuck, I just used the word promulgated in a sentence. Wait, Will, can you check if that means what I think it means? Promote or make widely known. An idea or cause. Fuck yeah, hark at me. Promulgated. There are many theories on who the berserkers were and how they became who they were. It's all mostly about alcohol and hallucinogenic drugs. See the usual Saturday night out in Manchester. It was thought that this mixture of stuff would make people turn into the beasts that they imagined in their minds, not that maybe they could actually turn into beasts. When we look at the root word berserker, it can be translated to bear man or bear man, as in naked man, or well, in as the animal bear man. So you can see berserker was natural and that Thorstein was the first. And alright, Thorstein wasn't a bear, but he was a fucking animal. Thorstein was a werewolf. So he was no bear, but he had the soul of me, which he could imbibe and then be a wolf or a werewolf. He had all the powers of a werewolf too. Strong, almost impossible to kill, and just genuinely fucking awesome. He would be one of the first berserkers and create a unit of uncontrollable men. Well, that is if he can create a unit of uncontrollable men. Would it be a unit? Although, before he created his famous squad, the thing he was famous for was attacking another tribe. By himself, as you do. Thorstein knew that to cause fear in the enemy was what he wanted more than anything else. The tribe in the next fjord had been building a small army of paid warriors and were planning to sail into his village, taking over the port and raiding it. When Thorstein Jarl heard this, he sat wondering on how on earth he would stop it. His own men were mainly away in Rust doing their thing, and he had only a few warriors and a few women to defend the village. Thorstein then offered to help and cause a little bit of mayhem. He went by himself, well, with me. Now, he'd only come out as a changeling really to his family, although there was some, ideas going around. He'd listened to his wolf soul, me, and kept it secret. Keeping that in the closet must have been a right challenge. He needed to create a reason why it was helpful for the people around him to have a werewolf that worked with them. He had to try and not be feared. If he was, he could have been sent from a village or even killed. Not that they'd have killed a werewolf. So this little adventure would give him a perfect way of showing off how useful it was to have a werewolf on your team. So he went over the hills and far away through the country quickly in his wolf form to the enemy village. If you know the geography of this part of the world, that's a tricky thing as a man, as the landscape is very uppy, downy and rocky. We, as the wolf, found it pretty easy. Even running the last few miles through the evening gloom as the night fell did not slow us down through this rocky land. As we came to outskirts of the village, we changed to our werewolf form and made our way through the ditch and up to the village's palisade. In the dark, I was invisible. I was the dark. The only thing anyone could ever see out was the infrequent flash of my eyes reflecting the moonlight. There were many new warriors in the stockade drinking and celebrating. They were drunk, and after eating, drinking and then fucking local women, they fell dead to sleep in a bunkhouse a little way out of the village. They hadn't posted any sentries on watch as, well, they thought they had nothing to fear from anyone. Why would they? For most small villages they now had an army. Little did they know there was a hungry wolf on the search for fear and for fun. We sat patiently outside the bunkhouse, waiting. We were waiting, and we waited until nothing but snores permeated the night. We could have charged in and murdered them all simply as the beast. Men would have took a while to wake, and in a bleary-eyed drunken state it would have been easy to do our wet work. As the stars came forth from behind the clouds and the local wolves started their roll calls, we made our way to the large bunkhouse door where we decided to do this thing. The door was only lightly latched and seemed inaudibly loud as it creaked open. Inside the bunk, men stirred but did not rise or startle, or notice a gigantic shadow squeeze its way through the doorway and become the dark of the hall. The only light was from the near-dead embers of the fire that no one tended. These were foolish men. We silently walked through the building, knowing that if anyone awoke, we would have killed them quickly and without challenge. A dog stirred beneath the table, turned towards the stalking wolf and quickly slunk back into the shadows, hiding from the death before him. He was no protector of these men against this thing on this night. Me and Thorstein had discussed a plan, a fun idea. We moved to the first snoring man, reaching for the man's skull with claws to tear and rend. We held the man's mouth, and he wiggled and shuffled as we muffled his cries. His eyes were wide open, and we opened our jaws to bite down. Yeah, okay, I'll take over. It's not a morning, but yeah, okay. It was morning, at least it seemed so. The infernal birds twittered and tweeted, and it hurt Nud's tortured head. People moved about outside the building. They were really being loud, and it really hurt his head. Dwarves must have crawled into his brain at night and were busy working with their hammers. Nud woke. The inside of his mouth tasted like a giant's arsehole and was as dry as a witch's tit. He slowly raised his head from the floor where he'd spent the night, realising he was lying in a puddle of his own piss. That happens when you drink too much of the good stuff he found. He cracked open his eyes and felt the brightness of the day as a baby's first view. He was discombobulated, confused, and didn't remember where he was for the first few moments. Once awake, oh God, he didn't want to be. He vomited on the floor through his mouth and nose. He wanted to die, and then feeling the seat of his pants wished he had. He hadn't only pissed himself. He hoped no one would catch him in this moment. He needed to clean himself off before the others noticed the accident, otherwise he would be ridiculed if he was caught, wet from his own urine and stinking of his own shit. He looked around the room. There was no movement. He was the first awake and would be the first to laugh at the others as they raised themselves from the sleep. What a night! The food, the drink, and the women were wonderful. Who had she been? Now today they were to go and fight. It was worth it all for the pay and the pleasure of the evenings with these hosts. Nud wandered outside to slake his thirst in the trough, slamming the door open. His head throbbed after the bang of wood against wood, but he managed to hold his puke in his body. Nud let the fresh air and light into the lodge. The cool air felt great, and the wind moving against his skin was delicious. This was undoubtedly a hangover well earned. He found the trough and dunked his head deep into the cool waters, rinsing the night from his eyes and filling his mouth with the ice-cold liquid. The feeling was shocking, reviving and refreshing. It cleared some of the dullness from his brain as he held it deep in the cooling fluid. He stroked his hands through his hair and removed his head from the water, shaking off the excess like a large dog. Nud looked at the village. Life had started somewhat earlier in the village than in the warrior lodge. He enjoyed those who looked upon him with the awe of those who didn't fight, and as his mind swam back into focus, he thanked the gods for the day, turning back to the lodge to bring his brothers back into the land of the living. He remembered something and smiled at the memory. He could not wait to remind Leif, his brother, of that limp dick he had last night with that lass, and to take the piss out of him for at least the rest of his life. Walking back into the lodge, Nud laughed and still shook the water from his hair. There was something strange and wrong. Something was missing from this scene. What was it? There was a lack of sound. No men were awake. No one moved or stirred. There were no snores. His laugh stopped. Nud was confused and went to find his brothers. His brother had obviously made it back to his bunk, and he could only be identified underneath the sheets by his red hair. This was going to be fun. Nud sneaked over to frighten him and knelt by the cot and grabbed his chest. "Awake, you limp-dicked bastard! You had the match of Freya in your arms last night, and yet you were too drunk to get a rod," he shouted. The body moved, but no response came. Leif must have been still drunk. Nud pulled back the sheet and realised that the sticky fluid on his knees and around his boots wasn't spilt beer. It was blood. Blood was everywhere. The floor was a sticky pool. Nud patted his brother's chest. The head fell from the bed to the floor. It lay pale and and bloodless in the pool. Its eyes had been torn from its head, leaving raw, empty sockets open to the world. The vomit rose again in his throat. Leif's neck had not been cut, but ripped and torn, and his head had been wrenched off. He shook the body again, thinking this might still wake his brother. He couldn't be dead. It just didn't make any sense. What had happened? He was still dreaming. He was having some drink-fueled nightmare or something. He bellowed his rage and anger to wake the others. Arise! Arise! When they find out who did this, they would die. He screamed again to raise everyone in the room, but no one lifted a head. Now jumping to his feet, he shouted, slipping in the fluid on the floor. No one reacted. Everyone was still. He just didn't understand. Did they not care? He ran to his other brother, lying in the dimness, and shouting, Sten! Sten! He grabbed him by the cloak collar, shaking him roughly. Sten's head fell from the body and rolled slowly to his feet. Eyeless sockets stared up at him. Nud's anger and confusion had gone. He was now terrified. Nud tried to wake more of the warriors as villagers entered the lodge to see what the issue was. They all moved around the room, shaking. The sleeping men, all were dead. Everyone that had entered the bunkhouse that night was fucking dead. Someone had somehow entered the room and killed each man in the most brutal way. Their heads had been twisted off their bodies and then replaced on their torsos. They'd torn out their eyes. Why? Was this some kind of evil magic, or why had he been chosen to survive? Whoever did this killed over 20 warriors without anyone seeing them or noticing them carrying out the murders. This couldn't have been a man who did this, could it? Why had he been the one chosen to live? Was it a reward or was it a warning? Had his brothers died for some reason related to him? His mind was filled with horror. No one would be taking the field that day. None of these would journey on well to the halls of the gods. This was wrong. Thorstein journeyed home. That night he was asked by his Jarl about what had happened in the next village. The young man came to him and emptied a sack onto the floor. Eyes bounced around on the ground as the crowd stepped back from the sticky marbles. They'd expected treasure, not bloody body parts. Thorstein laughed at their response. I have a gift for you, get it? I have many eyes for you. Maybe even Odin himself will come for one. I hear he needs a spare. I just don't think we'll be attacked today. Without these, they'll have difficulty finding us now. The crowd was silent. Thorstein looked at them. He flung the bag at the ground and just turned and walked away. The crowd and the Jarl feared him as much as they respected him. As in everything, secrets do not stay secret for long, and the news about the killings got out into the world. Of course, the number of dead doubled, and then doubled again, as in the telling of all stories. Having said that, the number of attackers stayed as one. A 14-year-old boy had sneaked into a village, and according to the stories, killed well over 100 men as they slept, and then had just simply walked away. He left no one wiser until the morning, when they found 99 bodies with 98 heads. He was supposed to have kept one of the heads for himself, and he did. That way, he was always ahead of everybody else. Get it? Thank you for listening. This is episode 104. Next episode 105 is a bit special. I'll be working with another author, Gregory Alexander Sharp. Go down to the link. You'll find a link to his book, Il Lupo. It's a bit special and it's a bit clever, the next episode. It's even clever for me, and I'm not very clever, so, well, I am. I don't know. Anyway, just a big thank you to everyone. Please share, review, and be nice and kind, and do things that are things nice and stuff, and I don't care anyway. I love you, bye.
Brought to you in association with Grendel Press. This is Werewolf the Podcast, a serial killer drama.